Throughout history, people have claimed to encounter strange beings, creatures that blur the line between man and beast. Some resemble hairy giants, others more like primitive humans, and all of them leave us wondering, what exactly is hiding in the shadows of our world? Today we'll explore two of the strangest reports, the mysterious Ape Canyon incident of North America and the bizarre legends of the Venezuelan Hairy Dwarves. Sasquatch and Ape Canyon, lying along the southeast shoulder of Mount St. Helens in Washington state, lies a gorge that is called Ape Canyon. Why is it called Ape Canyon? Well, it goes back as far as the 1920s. So, as mentioned, nearly a centenary. It's 99 years now. The story is as old as time within the field itself, but much more meaningful and somewhat scary. Along the steep rocky canyon is a popular trail for hikers and mountain bikers. A little further on and you would come across Ape Cave. The first encounter in 1924, a group of miners were working in the area and were spending the night in the gorge. They were kind of like, they had like a log cabin there. They were mining, they were doing mining things, looking for their fortune. In the small cabin on Mount St. Helens, the miners that were there, 5, survived a very bizarre attack on one certain night. The story may sound impossible, but it has never been disproved. While settling down to go get some rest, the cabin began to be hit with rocks. Now, this cabin, although it did get hit with rocks, these miners had earlier on in the day, they'd stumbled upon what they claimed as mountain apes, rock apes, as sometimes they're known as, and these massive ape-like things that we now know as Sasquatch and Bigfoot. They were just kind of walking a trail and they bumped into them. It's like 3 or 4 of them, they just bumped into him. And they kind of startled each other. The Sasquatch was, kind of roared, and, a confrontation happened, and one of the miners has shot one of the Sasquatches, according to the story of this trail going around this gorge area. And it had fallen off the cliff, and the other were kind of screaming and, and all this ruckus and what have you. And then they didn't think of it. They went back to the cabin and, kind of like, what have we just seen? What has just gone on? What was that? Anyway, that particular night, the cabin that the miners were staying in was literally pelted and attacked by these creatures that we now know as Sasquatch. But at the time, these miners had no idea what they were, and they were literally attacked throughout the night. So the miners walked outside to see what was happening at the time when all these, stones were hitting their cabin. To be sure, it wasn't an avalanche or anything similar like a force of nature. It was actually these things that they'd seen earlier in the day. But these things weren't just like apes. They were more human in appearance, but not human. They were very hard. I speak to a lot of people that see Sasquatch and stuff, and anybody that kind of explains what Sasquatch is, it's kind of ape-like and human-like, but neither at the same time, if that makes sense. It's close, but no cigar, if you like, Only so they resembled humans as they walked upright like a man, but they weren't humans. These things, these Sasquatches were growling and, howling, basically, screaming at them within the cabin. So the miners, after stepping outside briefly to see what was going on, ran back inside for safety. But the incident didn't stop there. Some of the miners grabbed their rifles and began to shoot at the creatures. The rocks would stop for a few moments, only to begin again all through the night. This continued into the morning. The miners did not know if they had shot the apes, or if they even came close, or if the bullets were even having like an impact. But there was at times when the apes had broken through the wood of the cabin in certain parts, on the roof and at the side. They'd broken through, and as they'd broken through, the men were shooting through the holes to try and get them back. They were grabbing at some of the miners that were inside, and it just went on like this for the entirety of the night. One of the apes actually managed to reach through the window, and he tried to grab an axe that was there. The attempt had actually failed. It was unknown what was done to prevent it. It's believed that the gunfire just kind of scared him off, but the actual ape was trying to get an axe, so it was trying to get a weapon at some point, according to some accounts of the story anyway. As dawn arrived, the rocks had pretty much ceased. The miners had ventured outside of the cabin and began to make their way out of the gorge and the canyon. One miner had gotten a good shot off at the creatures, and had later wrote in a book about the incident. They stated the incident had not been disproved to this point, to this day, meaning that no one can definitively say it did or didn't happen. However, it's kind of like a holy site within Bigfoot. Kind of, it's up there with Bluff Creek, and a lot of Bigfooters kind of go back to this. They kind of go back to this site every year in on, year out. And I'm guessing next year, when it'll be 2024, when it's centenary, I'm guessing it'll be a very busy area within the field. But you can actually go to the site. You can go to the site where the cabin was, and you can they've kind of figured out, like, working backwards through the story, where it all is and where it all happened, and you can go and visit this site. But I wanted to talk about this today because obviously it is the 99th year anniversary, but it is kind of one of them tales that it's kind of, I don't know how to best describe it, but it's kind of like one of the big tales within the Bigfoot community. It's up there with the PG film, the Patterson Gimlin film. It's up there with that. It's up there with I would say another one that's up there with it is like Matt Moneymaker's first recording of the Idaho Howl. I would say that's kind of up there. These kind of events are up there with like the best kind of stories or evidence, if you like, that we have. On November the 29th, 1954, between the hours of 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. in Caracas, Venezuela, Gustav Gonzalez, a tradesman originating from Havana in Cuba, aged 25 years old, in the company of his helper, Jose Ponce, the two men going to get pork butchery products at the Shepra wholesaler to sell them on the open market at daybreak. As they drove in Bella Vista Street in the warehouse sector, which was completely deserted in the early hours of the morning, the two men noted that all the street was illuminated as if it was bright as the daylight by a brilliantly bright object in the sky. They described this object as metallic or luminous sphere from about 2 to 4 meters in diameter that hovered motionless above the street. The object had 2 sorts of windows in the side, a little less than 1/2 meter in opening. What astonished the men the most is that the craft floated at a 1/2 meter height from the ground, without any support such as wheels, feet or landing gear of any kind. Gonzalez stopped the van and the two men looked at the object with amazement. They then got out of the truck, one after another, going into approximately 8 meters from the object, and Gonzalez then stumbled upon a 1 meter tall creature. This being that stood in front of the sphere was covered with stiff, dark hair. He had hands finished with 4 long claws like weapons, like knives. His head was round or perhaps under some kind of helmet, without ears, without a nose, without a mouth or anything like that. His eyes were large and oval shaped, shining or possibly reflecting the light from the headlights of the van like cat's eyes. He seemed not to wear any clothing except what was described as some sort of weird lion cloth kind of thing, and seemed to be barefoot. Gonzalez had the initial impression that something prevented him from moving, but he soon advanced towards the being and seized him between his arms, trying to stop him and drag him back towards his van. He lifted the being off of the ground and noted that he was very lightweight. The small being appeared much stronger than his stature and weight would have you think. The creature managed to break his grasp, and the creature hit and sent the man flying back to the ground. Gonzalez tried to stand up with the intention to continue the fight. However, he felt a kind of vibration in his body. He also felt like he was in some kind of a trance. Apparently, the small being made a feline jump at him, and Gonzalez instinctively pulled out his scout knife and he went to stab the creature in the shoulder. But at his great surprise, the blade did not penetrate, slipping away as if the being had some kind of armour. It was at this time that Gonzalez noticed that the being had webbed hands and 4 sharp claws that he used to try to grab him. During the brawl, Gonzalez saw 2 more beings coming towards him, apparently to help. The first one of these 2 new creatures held a lantern that blinded Gonzalez, preventing him from seeing what was going on. As the light subsided, he was astonished to see that all had disappeared. These creatures and the craft had just vanished in seconds. During the fight, Jose Ponce had also come out of the van. He witnessed the whole thing. Jose saw another being arriving from the grounds on the right of the road, climbing up a small slope with joined hands, carrying something like either stones or a lump of earth. This newcomer, as soon as he saw Jose, leaped 2 meters and landed inside of the sphere. He reappeared seconds later with a third being who held something like a long, metallic, shining tube, pointed it towards Gonzalez, and that emitted the blinding light. The first being went into the sphere, which took off vertically at a high speed and without any noise. Jose, who had seen enough, then turned heels to run towards a law enforcement station in the same street. Some 2 or 3 blocks away, Gonzalez joined him there a few minutes later, exhausted and in terror. Gonzalez, after having a drink and having recovered, told what had happened. The officers stated that the 2 men entered there at roughly 2:30 a.m, but that they were not drunk, giving a consistent, although astonishing, account of what had happened. The suggestions was put forward that perhaps they were drunk. It was checked that they had not been under the influence of alcohol at all. It was noted that they were nervous and that Gonzalez, who had tried to capture one of the beings, had bruises all down his left hand side. It was called upon the owner of the pork butchery, who the men should have made their delivery to that morning, and the pork butchery owner actually vouched for the men, saying he had dealt with the men for a while and knew them as being trustworthy. Statements were taken and Gonzalez was transferred at 3 p.m. to an emergency station, where the medical personnel on duty noted simple bruising on the left-hand side of his body. X-rays were taken to check whether or not he'd broken any bones or his ribs, but nothing had come back that he had. Many other people then came forward to report occurrences in the same sector at that hour. One resident said to have been woken between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning by something like a detonation or an explosion, plus a whistling sound, but she did not pay great attention to it at the time, thinking it was nothing. Another resident claimed that hours before the 2 men's encounter, she had seen a strange luminous craft that did not make any noise flying overhead, and that other people with her at the time had also seen the same thing. Commenting on the strangeness of the sighting, at 2 o'clock in the morning, she heard a detonation in the Bella Vista Street area. Around the same time, a resident travelling home, said that he suddenly observed a powerful light that illuminated his vehicle, forcing him to stop. Immediately, he heard something like a whistling sound. He restarted the car and at full speed as fast as he could went home, where he told his mother about it. She responded that she had heard something but she wasn't sure what it was. Dr. Julio Garces, laboratory assistant at Perez de Leon Hospital, stated that little after 2 a.m. when he passed his car in the vicinity of Bella Vista Street, he heard a cry of terror uttered by a frightening voice. He stopped to see what was happening and saw nothing but heard cries and whimpers or moans. These are just a few of the eyewitness accounts, and there's many more that got recorded, and you can read these all online. The encounter was passed on to various UFO groups and research parties. A lot of people were interviewed about the encounter, with a lot of people claiming to have seen or heard the exact same thing. Could this have been an encounter with some kind of extraterrestrial being? A being that seems to be some sort of dwarf-like Bigfoot? What are your thoughts?